A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Shadows of Blood. The scent of death still lingered in my memories. 15 years later, I could still see Marcus falling, his wolf form crumpling as the Shadowmere patrol tore through him like he was nothing more than prey. My brother had been only 17, barely a year into his adult wolf form, when they ambushed him during what should have been a routine border check. I was 8 then, old enough to understand that my big brother wasn't coming home, but too young to comprehend why Father's eyes went cold and never warmed again. Mira, focus. Father's voice cut through my memories as I stumbled during our morning combat training. Beta Thomas Castellan had no patience for weakness, especially not from his only remaining child. The Ashfords won't hesitate because you're daydreaming. I rolled to my feet, ignoring the ache in my ribs where his practice sword had connected. At 21, I was one of the strongest fighters in the Crescent Pack, but it never felt like enough. It would never bring Marcus back. Again, I said, raising my weapon. Father's weathered face showed approval for the first time that morning. This was our ritual. Dawn training sessions where he pushed me past my limits, where I tried desperately to become the warrior Marcus never got the chance to be. Our pack territory stretched across the northern mountains, dense forests that had belonged to our bloodline for over 2 centuries. The Crescent Pack had always been small, but fierce, our moon-shaped territory bordering the much larger Shadowmere lands to the east. For as long as anyone could remember, that border had been painted with blood. The hierarchy in our world was simple and absolute. Alpha commanded all. Beta served as second-in-command and advisor. Warriors protected the pack, and Omegas maintained our daily lives. Each wolf knew their place, their duty, their value to the whole. I existed somewhere between warrior and political asset, trained to fight, but groomed to serve the pack's greater needs. The Shadowmeres were everything we weren't: numerous, aggressive, and led by Alpha Reginald Ashford, whose family had ruled their territory for 5 generations. They claimed twice the land we did, commanded 3 times the wolves, and had never forgotten that our small pack sat on some of the richest hunting grounds in the region. The rogues hit the Morrison pack again last night, Father said as we finished our session. 12 dead, including their beta. I wiped sweat from my forehead, my wolf stirring uneasily beneath my skin. The rogue attacks had been escalating for months, targeting smaller packs throughout the region. Organized strikes that left no survivors, no witnesses, and no clear motive. That's the 5th pack in 2 months, I said. Someone's coordinating them. Alpha Vincent thinks so too. Father's expression darkened. That's why he's calling an emergency council meeting tonight. The Crescent Pack's Alpha was my father's closest friend, and the only reason our small pack had survived this long. Vincent Crane was strategic where Father was emotional, diplomatic where Father was confrontational. But even Vincent's careful leadership was struggling against the mounting threats. Rogues were wolves who'd been exiled from their packs or chosen to live outside pack law. Usually they were desperate, half-mad creatures who barely survived on the fringes of civilized territory. But these new rogues moved with military precision, struck with coordinated timing, and disappeared without leaving trails. Someone was training them. Someone was feeding them information about pack defenses and schedules. That evening, the entire pack gathered in our main hall. 53 wolves in human form, from elderly pack historians to teenagers barely past their first shift. The air thrummed with nervous energy and the scent of fear. Alpha Vincent stood at the front, his silver hair gleaming under the harsh lights. Despite being in his 60s, he still commanded respect through sheer presence. When he spoke, every conversation died. "The rogue threat has reached our doorstep," he began. 3 nights ago, they tested our eastern border. We drove them off, but they'll return with greater numbers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I caught my father's eye. He'd mentioned nothing about a border breach. "Our intelligence suggests these aren't random attacks," Vincent continued. "Someone is building an army of rogues, targeting packs systematically. We're weakened, isolated, and running out of time. The pack law was ancient and absolute. When faced with extinction, packs could forge alliances through marriage bonds. It was a ritual older than written history, binding not just individuals, but entire bloodlines through supernatural connection. The moon goddess herself was said to bless such unions when they serve the greater good. "What are you suggesting?" asked Elena Morrison, our head tracker. Vincent's pause stretched too long. When he spoke again, his words fell like stones into still water. "A marriage alliance with the Shadowmere pack." The hall erupted. Snarls, shouts, chairs scraping against the floor as wolves leaped to their feet in outrage. I felt my own wolf surge forward, bristling with inherited hatred. "You can't be serious." Father's voice cut through the chaos. "After what they did to Marcus." "I'm entirely serious." Vincent's alpha command rolled over us, forcing everyone back into their seats. "Alpha Reginald has agreed to the terms. Our packs will unite through marriage, combining our territorial defenses and military strength." "Who?" The question tore from my throat before I could stop it. Vincent's eyes found mine across the room, and I saw the answer in his expression before he spoke. "Mira Castellan will marry Kieran Ashford, heir to the Shadowmere pack." The words hit me like physical blows. Kieran Ashford, the wolf whose scent Father claimed to have found at Marcus's death scene. The prince of our enemy pack, the man I'd been raised to hate above all others. "No," I stood slowly, my wolf clawing for freedom. "Absolutely not. This isn't a request," Vincent said quietly. "It's pack law. The marriage will take place within the week." I looked at Father, desperate for support, for outrage, for anything resembling the man who'd spent 15 years teaching me that Ashfords were monsters. Instead, I saw defeat in his eyes. "It's the only way to save both our packs," he said hollowly. "Marcus is gone, Mira, but you can still protect what he died for." The betrayal cut deeper than any training wound. I'd spent my entire adult life preparing to avenge my brother, only to be told I should marry his killer instead. Around me, the pack began to murmur acceptance. The logic was sound. Individually, both packs were vulnerable. United, they might survive the rogue onslaught. My personal feelings were irrelevant compared to 53 lives, but logic meant nothing to the rage burning in my chest. "I won't do it," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet hall. "Find another way." "There is no other way." Vincent's tone held finality. "The ceremony will take place in 4 days, during the full moon. The Ashfords have already sent their acceptance. Then they can marry someone else. The agreement specifically names you, Mira." Beta Thomas offered his daughter as proof of good faith. I whirled on my father, betrayal sharp as silver in my throat. "You knew about this." "I knew we were dying," he said quietly. "Pack by pack. The rogues are picking us off. This alliance is our only hope. So you sold me. I saved you. I saved all of us." The pack was watching now. 52 pairs of eyes tracking our family drama like it was entertainment. I could smell their emotions. Fear, anticipation, relief that someone else was paying the price for their safety. "I need air," I managed. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring Vincent's call for me to return, ignoring Father's attempt to follow. The pack house felt like a trap, the walls closing in with each breath. Outside, the night was crisp and clear, stars scattered across the sky like silver dust. The forest called to me, promising space and silence, and the chance to run until my lungs burned. I shifted mid-stride, my bones cracking and reforming in the familiar, painful pleasure of transformation. My wolf was smaller than most, rust-colored with unusual golden markings around my eyes and paws. Father said I looked like my mother, who died when I was 3. I had no memories of her, only the ache of her absence and Father's refusal to speak her name. We ran until the pack house was miles behind us, until civilization gave way to wild forest, where ancient trees grew thick enough to block out the moon. This was the borderland, neutral territory that belonged to no pack. Dangerous, but free. When I finally stopped running, I found myself at Marcus's memorial tree, a massive oak where Father had carved my brother's name the day after his funeral. The bark was weathered now, the letters barely visible, but I traced them with trembling fingers. 15 years of grief. 15 years of training, preparing, dreaming of the day I'd make the Ashfords pay for what they'd taken from us. And now I was supposed to marry one of them, smile, and pretend it was for the greater good. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the carved name. "I'm so sorry, Marcus." The wind picked up, rattling leaves overhead like whispered secrets. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long, mournful, and achingly alone. The sound echoed my own heart perfectly. I stayed there until dawn, sitting with my back against Marcus's tree, trying to find a way forward that didn't involve betraying everything I'd ever believed in. But every path led to the same conclusion. My pack needed this alliance to survive, and I was the price they'd chosen to pay. When the sun finally rose, painting the forest in shades of gold and amber, I made my decision. I wouldn't go back. If Vincent wanted his political marriage, he could explain to the Ashfords why his chosen bride had vanished into the wilderness. If Father wanted to save the pack, he could find another way that didn't require sacrificing his daughter's honor on the altar of expedience. I was done being the good daughter, the obedient pack member, the acceptable loss in someone else's war. As I stood and brushed dirt from my clothes, preparing for a life of exile and uncertainty, I heard the sound of approaching footsteps, multiple sets, moving with the coordinated precision of a hunting party. My heart sank. They'd sent trackers after me. Vincent wasn't going to let his political pawn slip away so easily. But when the first figure emerged from between the trees, I realized my mistake. This wasn't a Crescent Pack pursuit team. The scent hit me a second later, unfamiliar, aggressive, wild, not pack wolves at all. Rogues. And they'd found me alone, miles from help, in neutral territory where my pack's protection meant nothing. 3 of them stepped into the clearing, moving with predatory confidence. They were larger than normal wolves, well-fed and clearly experienced fighters. Not the desperate outcasts I'd expected. Well, the largest one said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "Look what we have here. A little crescent wolf, all alone in the big scary forest." I backed toward Marcus's tree, mind racing through options. I was outnumbered, far from packlands, and facing rogues who seemed far too organized for comfort. "You're trespassing," I said, keeping my voice steady while my hand drifted toward the silver knife hidden in my boot. They laughed, a sound like breaking glass that made my wolf recoil in instinctive fear. "Trespassing?" The second rogue grinned, showing teeth filed to points. "Little girl, pack territories won't exist much longer. You might as well get used to it now." The words confirmed my worst fears. These attacks weren't random. Someone was systematically destroying the pack system, and they were confident enough to send rogues into neutral territory to hunt stragglers. "Who's giving you orders?" I demanded. "Someone who pays better than your alpha," the third rogue said. "Someone who promises us real hunting when this is all over." They spread out, surrounding me with practiced ease. I was trapped against the memorial tree, with nowhere to run and no hope of winning a 3-against-1 fight. But I was a Castellan. We didn't go down without a fight. I drew my silver blade and settled into a defensive stance. Everything Father had ever taught me, flooding back in perfect clarity. If I was going to die, I'd make sure they remembered the encounter. "Come on then," I said. "Let's finish this." They attacked simultaneously, and I knew with crystal certainty that I was about to join Marcus in whatever came after death. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd die fighting rogues in the same forest where my brother had fallen, never knowing whether Kieran Ashford was truly our enemy, or if I'd spent 15 years hating the wrong wolf. As claws reached for my throat, my last coherent thought was wondering if my marriage alliance would die with me, or if Vincent would simply find another daughter to sacrifice for the greater good. The answer, I realized, no longer mattered. I was finally free. Chapter 2. Golden Eyes. The first rogue lunged at my throat with claws extended, moving faster than any normal wolf should. I ducked and slashed upward with my silver blade, catching him across the ribs. He howled and stumbled back, but the wound was shallow, not enough to stop him. The second attacker came from my left while I was focused on the first. His claws raked across my shoulder, spinning me sideways into the memorial tree. Pain flared through my back as bark scraped against torn skin. "She's got some fight," the third rogue observed with amusement. This might actually be entertaining. I pressed my back against Marcus's tree, silver knife weaving defensive patterns in front of me. Blood ran down my arm, hot and sticky, but I ignored it. Father's training had prepared me for this. Outnumbered, outmatched, but never giving up. The largest rogue feinted left, then came right. I anticipated the move and managed to score another shallow cut across his forearm. Silver burned against shifter flesh, filling the air with the acrid smell of seared skin. "Enough playing," he snarled. "Kill her." All three attacked at once. I got my blade into the first one's shoulder, but momentum carried him forward anyway. His weight slammed me against the tree, driving the breath from my lungs. The knife fell from nerveless fingers as claws sought my throat. This was how I would die, not in glorious battle, but torn apart by rogues in a forest clearing where no one would find my body for weeks. Father would never know what happened to me. The marriage alliance would crumble. My pack would fall to these organized monsters. Then the forest exploded. A roar shook leaves from the trees. Not the sound of any normal wolf, but something primal and ancient that spoke to the deepest parts of shifter instinct. The rogue pinning me froze, his eyes wide with sudden terror. The wolf that burst from the darkness was massive, larger than any shifter I'd ever seen. Midnight black fur rippled over muscles like steel cables, and his eyes burned gold like captured sunfire. When he moved, it was with liquid grace that made death look like art. He hit the first rogue with enough force to snap bones. The impact sent the body flying 20 feet to crash against a distant tree with a wet crunch. The second rogue tried to run. The giant wolf caught him in 3 strides, jaws closing around his throat with surgical precision. The third rogue, the one who'd been holding me down, scrambled backward on all 4s. "Please," he whimpered. We were just following orders. The massive wolf's golden gaze fixed on him, and something passed between them, some communication beyond words. The rogue's face went pale with absolute terror. "No," he whispered. "You're supposed to be dead. They said you were dead." The wolf shifted to human form, and my world tilted sideways. Kieran Ashford stood before me, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across sharp cheekbones. He was handsome in a dangerous way, all controlled power and predatory elegance, but it was his eyes that held me frozen. The same burning gold as his wolf form, ancient and knowing. They were wrong, he said quietly, his voice carrying an accent I couldn't place. "You can tell them that when you see them in hell." The rogue never got the chance to scream. Kieran moved with inhuman speed, his hand shooting out to grip the rogue's throat. There was a wet snap, and the body crumpled to the forest floor. Silence settled over the clearing like a heavy blanket. 3 rogues lay dead, their blood soaking into the earth around Marcus's memorial tree, and I was alone with the man I was supposed to marry. The man I'd been raised to believe killed my brother. "Are you injured?" Kieran asked, turning to face me fully. I tried to speak and found my throat closed. This was nothing like I'd expected. Where was the monster from Father's stories? The savage killer who'd torn Marcus apart for sport. "I asked if you were injured," he repeated, taking a step closer. His scent hit me properly for the first time. Pine and snow and something wild and clean that made my wolf whimper with unexpected recognition. Not the reek of violence and cruelty I'd been taught to expect, but something that spoke to safety, protection, home. The contradiction triggered my fight response. I lunged for my fallen silver blade, bringing it up toward his heart with all my remaining strength. If this was a trap, if he'd killed the rogues just to claim me for himself, I wouldn't make it easy. He caught my wrist effortlessly, his skin barely reddening where the silver pressed against his palm. Most wolves would have been screaming, blistering, unable to maintain contact with pure silver. Kieran didn't even flinch. "Interesting," he murmured, studying my face with unsettling intensity. "Most wolves would be in agony by now. Most wolves aren't immune to silver," I snapped, trying to twist free from his grip. Something flickered across his features. Surprise, recognition, or something deeper I couldn't identify. "No," he agreed quietly. "They're not." He released my wrist but didn't step back, those golden eyes continuing to catalog every detail of my appearance. Under his scrutiny, I became hyper-aware of my torn clothing, blood-matted hair, and the way my heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "You're Mira Castellan," he said. It wasn't a question. "And you're the bastard who killed my brother." His expression went carefully blank, like a door slamming shut. "Is that what they told you? I don't need to be told anything. I can smell truth from lies." "Can you?" He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Then tell me, Mira Castellan, what do you smell when you look at me?" I breathed deeper despite myself, my enhanced senses automatically parsing the complex layers of his scent. Pack loyalty, determination, grief that ran bone deep. And underneath it all, something that made no sense. Guilt. Years-old guilt that matched the weight I carried for failing to save Marcus. But that was impossible. If he'd killed my brother, he should smell of satisfaction. Of violence justified. Not this crushing remorse that seemed to permeate every molecule of his being. "I smell lies," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Kieran smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then you're not as gifted as I thought." He stepped back, creating space between us that somehow felt worse than his proximity. The absence of his warmth left me oddly bereft, like something essential had been withdrawn. "The rogues are dead, but more will come," he said, scanning the forest with professional efficiency. "This territory isn't safe, especially not for a lone wolf. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. Your alpha made an agreement, and I intend to honor it." His golden eyes hardened like cooling metal. "The marriage will proceed as planned. Over my dead body, that," he said quietly, glancing at the rogue corpses, "can be arranged, but I'd prefer you alive." The casual way he said it, not a threat, just a statement of fact, sent ice through my veins. This was the predator Father had warned me about, the monster capable of casual violence. Before I could respond, he'd shifted back to his massive wolf form. He looked at me expectantly, and when I didn't move, he let out a low growl that raised every hair on my body. Alpha command, the supernatural compulsion that forced submission from lesser wolves, bypassing conscious thought, to speak directly to the animal within. My body began moving toward him before I realized what was happening, my wolf responding to his authority despite my human mind's resistance. "No," I snarled, fighting the compulsion with everything I had. "I won't be commanded by you or anyone else." I dug my heels into the earth, hands clenched into fists, forcing my traitorous body to stop. Pain lanced through my skull as I fought against instincts older than civilization, but I held my ground. Kieran shifted back to human form, his expression showing genuine surprise. "You resisted Alpha command. I'm not part of your pack." "No," he agreed thoughtfully. "You're not. But you will be soon." The words hung between us like a promise and a threat. In 3 days, I would be bound to this man for life. In 3 days, everything I'd believed about honor and loyalty and revenge would change forever. "Tell me something, future wife," he said softly, moving closer again despite my obvious tension. "If I really killed your brother, why did I just save your life?" The question hit like a physical blow. I had no answer for it, no way to reconcile the monster from Father's stories with the wolf who'd appeared from nowhere to rescue me from certain death. "Maybe you need me alive for the alliance," I said weakly. "There are other ways to forge alliances. Other daughters, other packs." His golden gaze never left mine. "I chose to save you specifically. Ask yourself why. Because you're a manipulative bastard who wants a compliant wife? Because," he said quietly, "you're not the only one who's been living with guilt over that night 15 years ago." Before I could process his words, he'd vanished back into the forest with inhuman speed, leaving me alone with 3 dead rogues and questions that threatened to shatter everything I'd ever believed. The moon hung overhead, casting everything in silver light that made the blood look black against the earth. In the distance, a wolf howled. Long, mournful, and achingly familiar. 3 days until my wedding. 3 days to figure out who Kieran Ashford really was, and whether I'd spent 15 years hating the wrong wolf. As I picked up my silver knife and started the long walk back to pack territory, one thought echoed in my mind. He'd called it guilt, not regret. And there was a difference between feeling bad about something you'd done and feeling bad about something you'd failed to prevent. The question was, which emotion was I smelling on him? And why did part of me desperately want to find out? Chapter 3. Broken Boundaries. I returned to pack territory at dawn, blood dried on my clothes and questions burning in my mind. The guards at the border took one look at my appearance and immediately escorted me to Alpha Vincent, who was pacing his office like a caged wolf. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded the moment I walked through the door. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" "Rogues attacked me at Marcus's memorial," I said, dropping into a chair without invitation. 3 of them. Organized, well-fed, following orders. Vincent's anger shifted to concern. "Are you hurt? How did you escape?" I hesitated, the truth sitting heavy on my tongue. Kieran Ashford killed them. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Vincent's face cycled through surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been relief. He was there by coincidence? He was tracking me. The admission tasted bitter. He said the marriage will proceed as planned, whether I cooperate or not. Good. Vincent's blunt response made my wolf bristle. Because the Shadowmere delegation arrives this afternoon for the pre-ceremony negotiations. You'll remain here until then. You're keeping me prisoner? I'm keeping you safe, and ensuring you don't do anything else to jeopardize this alliance. His alpha command wrapped around the words, making them impossible to argue with. Your wedding is in 72 hours, Mira. Accept it. The next several hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. I was confined to the pack house, supposedly for my own protection, but really to prevent another escape attempt. Father visited once, his face haggard with stress and sleepless nights. "I know you're angry," he said, settling into the chair across from my bed. "But this is bigger than our family's grief. Is it?" I met his eyes steadily. "Or are you so consumed with hating the Ashfords that you'll sacrifice your daughter to hurt them?" "Sacrifice?" His voice rose. "Mira, you're marrying the heir to the most powerful pack in the region. You'll be Luna of territories that span 3 mountain ranges. How is that sacrifice? Because I'll be bound to a man I don't know, in a pack that killed Marcus." Father's face went gray. "Marcus is dead. We're not. And if this alliance fails, we'll join him soon enough." The Shadowmere delegation arrived at sunset, a convoy of black SUVs that screamed wealth and power. I watched from my window as they disembarked. 12 wolves in expensive suits, moving with military precision. At their center stood a man who could only be Alpha Reginald Ashford. He was older than I'd expected, silver-haired and lean, but his presence commanded immediate respect. Even from 4 stories up, I could feel the weight of his authority pressing against my consciousness. But it was the wolf beside him who held my attention. Kieran moved with that same liquid grace I'd witnessed in the forest, but now he was dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean build. Even in human clothing, he looked dangerous. As if sensing my observation, he lifted his head and looked directly at my window. Our eyes met across the distance, and I felt that same strange recognition pulse between us. Not quite attraction, not quite familiarity, but something deeper that made my wolf whimper with confused longing. "The negotiations will take place tonight," Vincent announced when he came to collect me an hour later. "You're required to attend. Required to smile and nod while you sell me like livestock. Required to represent your pack with dignity." His tone brooked no argument. "This alliance will save lives, Mira. Remember that." The formal dining room had been transformed for the occasion, long tables arranged in a square with the Crescent Pack on one side and Shadowmere on the other. Ancient protocols governed these proceedings: territorial agreements, dowry negotiations, ceremony details that would bind our packs together through supernatural law. I took my designated seat between Father and Vincent, hyper-aware of Kieran's presence across the room. He'd changed into more casual clothes, dark jeans and a white shirt that somehow made him look even more dangerous than the suit had. "Before we begin," Alpha Reginald said, his voice carrying easily through the room, "I want to address the history between our packs." The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Father's hand clenched on the table beside me. 15 years ago, a tragedy occurred at our shared border. Thomas Castellan's son was killed during what should have been a routine patrol encounter. Reginald's pale eyes found Father across the table. "I want you to know that the wolves responsible were punished." "Punished how?" Father's voice was barely controlled. "Exiled, stripped of pack protection, and left to survive as rogues. Reginald's expression remained neutral. Pack justice was served. It was more than Father had ever been told officially, but I could see it wasn't enough. 15 years of grief and hatred couldn't be erased by a simple statement of past justice. My son was investigating rogue activity in that area, Father said carefully. What exactly did your patrol think they were stopping? A perceived territorial incursion. They acted without authorization and paid the price. Reginald glanced at Kieran briefly. Some wounds take time to heal properly. Something passed between father and son in that look. A communication I couldn't decipher. But that left Kieran's jaw tight with tension. The important thing, Reginald continued, is ensuring such tragedies never happen again. This alliance represents a new beginning for both our bloodlines. The negotiations proceeded through traditional channels. Territory boundaries, hunting rights, military cooperation protocols. I listened with half an ear, more focused on studying Kieran's reactions to various proposals. He spoke little, but when he did, his suggestions were intelligent and strategic. He advocated for joint patrols along rogue-prone borders, shared intelligence networks, and coordinated defense strategies that would benefit both packs equally. Nothing about his demeanor suggested the savage killer from Father's stories. Now for the personal arrangements, Reginald said as they moved to the final topic. The marriage ceremony will take place in 3 days during the full moon. Kieran will remain here until then to get acquainted with his bride. My stomach dropped. He's staying here? Pack law requires a period of courtship before the formal ceremony, Vincent explained. Even in arranged marriages, the moon goddess demands evidence of willing partnership. How willing can it be if I have no choice? You always have a choice. Kieran spoke for the first time all evening, his golden eyes finding mine across the table. No one can force you to accept the mating bond. The ceremony is just ritual. The bond itself requires consent from both parties. And if I refuse to consent, then you remain married in law, but not in spirit. A political alliance without supernatural backing. His gaze never wavered. Is that what you want? A marriage of convenience that benefits everyone except the people trapped in it? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the table, both packs waited for my response, their futures hanging on my decision. I want to understand why you saved my life today, I said finally. Then you'll have 3 days to find out. After the formal negotiations ended, the Shadowmere delegation prepared to leave, all except Kieran, who would remain as a guest of the Crescent Pack until our wedding. As the others departed, I found myself alone with him in the now empty dining room. Your father seems like a good man, he said quietly, collecting scattered papers from the negotiations. He is. That's why this is so hard for him. Believing his daughter's husband killed his son. Kieran's voice held no judgment, only understanding. I can imagine. Did you? The question escaped before I could stop it. Kill Marcus? He stopped organizing papers and looked at me directly. No, but I was supposed to. My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? It means, he said carefully, that some secrets are too dangerous to share in rooms where others might overhear. Walk with me? Against every instinct screaming warnings, I followed him outside. The night air was crisp and clean, stars scattered across a clear sky. We walked in silence until we reached the small garden behind the pack house, far enough from the building to ensure privacy. 15 years ago, I was 18 and desperate to prove myself to my father. Kieran began, settling on a stone bench and gesturing for me to join him. When reports came in about a lone wolf near our border, I convinced him to let me lead the response patrol. I remained standing, arms crossed defensively. And I found your brother tracking a group of rogues who'd been raiding both our territories. He was injured, outnumbered, but still trying to do his duty. Kieran's voice grew quiet. I was supposed to capture or kill any crescent wolf found on our land. Instead, I helped him fight. The world tilted sideways. You fought with Marcus? For about 10 minutes, until my patrol caught up with us. His hands clenched into fists. They saw me fighting alongside a crescent wolf and assumed I'd been attacked. Before I could explain, they'd torn him apart. Tears burned my eyes. You tried to save him. I failed to save him. Just like I failed to stop my own wolves from committing murder. He looked up at me. and I saw the same bone-deep guilt I'd been carrying for 15 years, reflected in his golden eyes. I've spent every day since then wondering if there was something more I could have done. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why let people think? Because the wolves who killed him were my father's most trusted enforcers. Because revealing the truth would have destabilized the pack at a critical time. Because I was 18, and afraid, and made the wrong choice. He stood, moving closer until I could smell that clean, wild scent that made my wolf respond despite everything. I've regretted it every day since. The rogues Marcus was tracking, I said slowly, pieces clicking together. Were they the same ones who've been attacking packs recently? Organized, well-armed, following someone's orders. Kieran nodded grimly. Your brother died trying to stop something that's still happening. This marriage alliance isn't just about combining our strengths. It's about finishing what he started. We stood in silence for long moments, the weight of shared guilt and purpose settling between us. Finally, Kieran stepped back. You asked why I saved your life today. It's because I owe Marcus Castellan a debt I can never repay. Protecting his sister is the closest I can come to honoring his memory. Is that the only reason? He hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his features. No, but the other reasons are complicated. Try me. Because when I saw you fighting those rogues, refusing to give up even when death was certain, you reminded me why I wanted to be a better man than my father's son. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because in 3 days, you'll be my wife, and I'd rather earn your respect than your obedience. The confession hung between us like a bridge neither of us was ready to cross. Part of me wanted to ask what he meant about being better than his father's son, but exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. I should go inside, I said finally. Mira. He caught my arm gently as I turned to leave. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I promise you, I will never hurt you the way my wolves hurt your brother. You have my word. Looking into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, I almost believed him. Almost. But 15 years of hatred didn't disappear overnight, no matter how compelling his explanations, or how much my wolf seemed to trust him instinctively. We'll see, I said, pulling free from his touch. We'll see. As I walked back toward the pack house, I could feel his eyes following me until I disappeared inside. 3 days until our wedding. 3 days to decide whether Kieran Ashford was my enemy or my salvation. 3 days to figure out why my wolf seemed to think she already knew the answer. Chapter 4. Dangerous Territory. The next morning found Kieran already in the training yard, moving through combat forms with liquid precision. I watched from my bedroom window as he flowed between strikes and defensive positions, his body a weapon honed by years of discipline. Admiring your future husband? Father's voice made me jump. Studying the enemy, I corrected, but the words felt hollow now. Is he? Still the enemy, I mean. Father moved to stand beside me at the window, after what he told you last night. I'd filled Father in on Kieran's explanation about Marcus's death. He'd listened in silence, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally a grief so profound I'd had to look away. I don't know what to believe anymore, I admitted. Then maybe it's time to find out for yourself. Father squeezed my shoulder. Go train with him. See what kind of man he really is when he thinks no one's watching. 20 minutes later, I entered the training yard wearing workout clothes and carrying my practice weapons. Kieran paused mid-form when he saw me, sweat gleaming on his chest above loose training pants. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Too many questions. I set down my weapon case and began stretching. Father says the best way to know a wolf is to fight alongside him. Wise advice. Kieran grabbed a towel and wiped his face. What did you have in mind? Sparring. No weapons, no shifting. Just skill against skill. He considered this, then nodded. Standard rules? First to yield or draw blood wins? Agreed. We circled each other slowly, taking measure. Kieran was larger and stronger, but I was faster and had trained specifically to fight bigger opponents. The key would be using his size against him. He moved first, a testing jab that I slipped easily. I countered with a quick combination to his ribs, but he blocked both strikes and grabbed for my wrist. I twisted free and danced backward, already breathing hard. You're good, he said, genuinely impressed. I had a motivated teacher. We engaged again, this time more seriously. Kieran's style was elegant and efficient, wasting no movement, but I could see the deadly force behind each strike. He was holding back significantly, treating this as training rather than combat. I feinted left and came right with an elbow strike aimed at his solar plexus. He caught my arm and used my momentum to spin me around, pinning me against his chest with one arm across my throat. "Yield?" he asked, his breath warm against my ear. Instead of answering, I drove my heel into his instep and elbowed backward into his ribs. He grunted and loosened his grip just enough for me to break free and put distance between us. "Dirty fighting," he observed with approval. "I like it. Father taught me that honor doesn't keep you alive. Smart man." We circled again, both of us more wary now. I could smell the change in his scent. Less controlled, more primal. His wolf was responding to the challenge, viewing me as a worthy opponent, rather than something fragile to be protected. When he came at me again, it was with increased intensity. I barely got my guard up in time to block a strike that would have dropped me. The impact sent shockwaves up both arms, but I managed to counter with a knee toward his midsection. He caught my leg and twisted, sending me spinning to the ground. I rolled and came up in a crouch, expecting him to press his advantage. Instead, he waited for me to regain my feet. "Why did you do that?" I demanded. "Do what?" "Let me recover. You had me down. Why not finish it?" Kieran's expression grew thoughtful. "Because I'm not trying to defeat you, Mira. I'm trying to understand you. And what do you understand so far? That you fight like someone who's been abandoned before and refuses to let it happen again. That you'd rather die standing than live on your knees. That you're stronger than you know and more afraid than you show." He moved closer, close enough that I could see gold flecks in his eyes. "That you're exactly the kind of woman who could make this arrangement into something real." My heart stuttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said softly, "that I've been dreading this marriage for all the wrong reasons." Before I could respond, Vincent's voice cut across the training yard. "Mira, Kieran, we need you in the briefing room, now." The urgency in his tone sent ice through my veins. We followed him inside, where we found Father and several senior pack members gathered around a table covered in maps and photographs. "3 more packs hit last night," Vincent said without preamble. "The Riverside Pack, Mountain View, and Silver Creek, all within 50 miles of here." I studied the photographs, my stomach churning at the systematic destruction they showed. Bodies torn apart, buildings burned, no survivors. "That's 7 packs in 2 weeks, Father said grimly. "At this rate, there won't be anyone left to form alliances with." "The pattern's getting clearer," Kieran said, tracing connections between attack sites on the map. "They're creating a perimeter around something, isolating specific territories." "Around what?" Vincent asked. "Around us," I realized, the pieces clicking together. "They're surrounding the Crescent and Shadowmere territories, eliminating potential allies before moving in for the final strike." Kieran nodded approvingly. "Your tactical instincts are excellent. That's exactly what they're doing." "Then we need to accelerate our timeline," Vincent said. "The marriage ceremony needs to happen tonight." "Tonight?" My voice cracked. "That's impossible. We haven't completed the courtship period, haven't—" "We're out of time," Father interrupted. "If these attacks continue at this pace, we'll be completely isolated within days. The alliance needs to be formalized now, while we still can." I looked at Kieran, searching his face for some sign of how he felt about this development. His expression was carefully neutral, but I caught a flash of something in his eyes. Anticipation? Concern? It was gone too quickly to interpret. "What do you think?" Vincent asked him. "I think," Kieran said carefully, "that we should ask the bride what she wants. This is her life we're rearranging." All eyes turned to me. The weight of their expectations, their fears, their desperate hope pressed down like a physical force. In the span of 24 hours, I'd learned that everything I'd believed about Marcus's death was wrong, that the man I was supposed to marry wasn't my enemy, and that rogues were systematically destroying every pack in the region. Now they wanted me to bind myself to Kieran forever, tonight, based on nothing but necessity and a growing attraction I barely understood. "If I agree to this," I said slowly, "what exactly am I agreeing to? A political marriage? A real one?" Something in between? That's up to you and Kieran to decide, Vincent said diplomatically. I turned to face my intended husband directly. What do you want from this marriage? Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes searching mine. I want, he said finally, to give you the choice to want it too. Tonight feels rushed, but the circumstances are what they are. If you agree, I promise to earn whatever you're willing to give me. If you don't, he shrugged, then we find another way to save both our packs. There is no other way, Father said urgently. Mira, please. This is bigger than personal preferences. I know that. I kept my eyes on Kieran. I also know that if I say yes tonight, there's no taking it back. Marriage bonds are permanent. Not just marriage, Kieran said quietly. Mating bonds if we choose to complete them. But that would be separate from tonight's ceremony. Later, when you're ready. If you're ever ready. The distinction mattered more than I could express. Marriage was politics and law. Mating was spiritual and eternal. He was offering me time to decide which I wanted this to become. The ceremony preparations can be ready by moonrise, Vincent said. Both packs will attend. It will be binding under supernatural law. And the rogues? I asked. We'll post triple guards, call in every favor we have for additional security. Father promised. Tonight will be the safest you'll ever be. I looked around the room at faces I'd known my entire life. Wolves who'd helped raise me after Mother died, who'd trained with me, laughed with me, supported me through every challenge. They were counting on me to save them. Then I looked at Kieran. This golden-eyed stranger who claimed to have tried to save my brother, who'd rescued me from rogues, who fought like poetry, and spoke like he understood exactly what this choice was costing me. All right, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Tonight it is. The relief in the room was palpable. Vincent immediately began issuing orders for ceremony preparations, while Father started making calls to arrange security. Within minutes, the briefing room had emptied except for Kieran and me. Are you sure about this? He asked when we were alone. No, I admitted, but I'm sure that doing nothing will get everyone I love killed. Sometimes that has to be enough. And after tonight? When the immediate crisis is over and you're bound to a man you barely know? I considered the question seriously. I guess we'll figure it out as we go. Unless you have a better plan? Actually, he said, moving closer until I could smell that intoxicating wildness that seemed to surround him. I was thinking we could start with this. He cupped my face in his hands, thumbs brushing across my cheekbones with surprising gentleness. His eyes searched mine, asking permission, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. When his lips met mine, it was like coming home and setting fire to everything I'd ever known simultaneously. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when I responded by pressing closer, it deepened into something that made my wolf howl with recognition, and my human mind reel with possibilities. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. That was, I started. Unexpected, he finished. I was going to say dangerous. That too. His smile was warm and genuine, transforming his entire face. But danger can be worth it, if you're brave enough to see where it leads. As we stood there in the empty briefing room, his hands still framing my face and my heart racing with more than just adrenaline, I realized that maybe I was brave enough after all. Tonight, I would marry Kieran Ashford. Tomorrow, we would face whatever came next together. And for the first time since this nightmare began, that felt like a choice I could live with. Chapter 5. Shattered Truths. The wedding ceremony proceeded under a full moon. Both packs gathered in the ancient stone circle that had hosted supernatural rituals for centuries. I wore my mother's white dress, altered hastily to fit, while Kieran stood opposite me in traditional ceremonial robes that emphasized his imposing presence. Alpha Vincent performed the ritual, his voice carrying the ancient words that would bind our packs together through marriage. As he spoke of unity and strength, I caught Kieran's eye and saw my own mixture of hope and uncertainty reflected there. Do you, Mira Castellan, accept this bond freely given for the protection and prosperity of both bloodlines? I do, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Do you, Kieran Ashford, accept this bond freely given for the protection and prosperity of both bloodlines? I do. Vincent raised the ceremonial goblet, filled with wine mixed with drops of blood from both our hands. Then, by the authority of pack law and the blessing of the moon goddess, I pronounce you husband and wife. May your union bring strength to your people and peace to your territories. We drank from the goblet, sealing the alliance. The crowd erupted in celebration, but their cheers felt muted against the weight of what we'd just committed to. The reception was a blur of congratulations and political discussions about joint patrols and resource sharing. I smiled and played the happy bride, while my mind reeled with the enormity of what had just happened. I was married to Kieran Ashford, forever. As the evening wore on, exhaustion began to take its toll. The events of the past few days, the rogue attack, learning the truth about Marcus, the accelerated wedding, had pushed me past my limits. "You look tired," Kieran said, appearing at my elbow during a brief lull in well-wishers. "It's been a long day. Would you like to get some air? There's something I need to show you." We slipped away from the reception, walking toward the forest edge where the celebration sounds faded to background noise. The night air was crisp and clean, helping clear my head. "What did you want to show me?" I asked. Instead of answering, Kieran pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This arrived during the ceremony. I didn't want to ruin your wedding day, but you need to see it." The paper was expensive, cream-colored, with my name written in elegant script. Inside was a single sheet with a message that made my blood run cold. "Congratulations on your marriage. Such a shame it will be so brief. Your new husband has been lying to you about more than just your brother's death. Ask him about the rogue camps. Ask him about the orders he's been following. Ask him how many packs have died because of his family's ambitions. A friend." I read it twice, the words blurring as panic rose in my throat. "Kieran," I said slowly. "What is this?" His face had gone carefully neutral, the same expression he'd worn during the pack negotiations. Someone trying to drive a wedge between us. By telling lies? Or by revealing truths you haven't shared yet? "Mira, are there rogue camps? Have you been following orders I don't know about?" My voice rose with each question. "How many packs, Kieran? How many have died because of your family's ambitions?" His silence was answer enough. I backed away from him, the letter crumpling in my fist. "You bastard. You lying, manipulative bastard. It's not what you think." "Then explain it. Explain why someone would send this on our wedding night if there wasn't truth in it." Before Kieran could respond, the sounds of celebration behind us changed. Shouts of alarm replaced laughter. The acrid smell of smoke drifted through the trees. We ran back toward the stone circle to find chaos. The reception area was under attack, rogues pouring from the forest in organized waves. These weren't the desperate outcasts I'd fought before. They moved with military precision, armed with silver weapons and coordinated tactics. "The children!" someone screamed. Pack members scattered in all directions, some shifting to wolf form to fight, others herding the vulnerable toward the pack house. Bodies already littered the ground, and more fell with each passing second. I shifted instantly. My rust-colored wolf smaller than most, but built for speed. I raced toward the pack house where the youngest pack members had been sheltered, dodging between fighters and fallen bodies. A rogue intercepted me halfway there, massive and scarred, with eyes that held too much intelligence for a simple outcast. His claws raked across my ribs as I tried to dart past, spinning me sideways into a tree. Pain flared through my side, but I rolled and came up fighting. This rogue was different from the others. Stronger, faster, with a coordination that spoke of extensive training. As we fought, I caught glimpses of the larger battle. The attacks were too organized, too well-timed. Someone had inside knowledge of our security arrangements, our guard rotations, our defensive positions. Someone had planned this assault to coincide with our wedding, when both packs would be gathered in one location. The rogue I was fighting suddenly froze, his head tilting as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he smiled, a horrible expression on his wolf features, and spoke in human voice. "Marcus Ashford sends his regards." The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Ashford, Kieran's uncle, the beta of the Shadowmere pack. I'd met him briefly during the delegation visit, a silver-haired man with calculating eyes. He's alive? I managed between dodging strikes. Very much so. And he has plans for both these territories that don't include your new alliance. The rogue lunged again, but this time I was ready. I ducked under his charge and raked my claws along his throat, dropping him instantly. But his words echoed in my mind as I raced toward the pack house. Marcus Ashford was behind the rogue attacks. Kieran's own uncle was orchestrating the systematic destruction of every pack in the region. The question was, did my new husband know? I reached the pack house to find it under siege. A dozen rogues surrounded the building while terrified voices cried out from inside. The main doors were barred, but they wouldn't hold long against determined assault. I needed help, needed backup, but when I looked around the battlefield, my heart sank. We were losing. Bodies of Crescent and Shadowmere wolves lay scattered across the ceremonial grounds, and more fell with each passing minute. Then I saw him. Kieran in his massive black wolf form, fighting through a knot of rogues with devastating efficiency. But instead of protecting the pack house or the fleeing civilians, he was moving systematically toward the forest edge. Away from the battle. Away from the people who needed him. The letter's accusations crashed back over me with sickening clarity. Ask him about the orders he's been following. As I watched, Kieran reached the forest edge and shifted to human form. He pulled something from his pocket, a communication device of some kind, and spoke into it briefly before shifting back and rejoining the fight. But it was too late. I'd seen enough. My new husband wasn't trying to protect anyone. He was coordinating with someone else, giving updates or receiving instructions while pack members died around him. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. I'd let myself believe his story about Marcus, had started to trust him, had even begun to think this marriage might become something real. Instead, I'd bound myself to the enemy. A child's scream from the pack house snapped me back to immediate priorities. Whatever Kieran's true loyalties, innocent lives were at stake. I could deal with my husband's treachery later, assuming any of us survived the night. I threw myself at the rogues besieging the building, fighting with desperate fury. One by one, I managed to draw them away from the doors, leading them into the forest where I could use terrain to my advantage. But there were too many, and I was already injured from my earlier fights. As the fourth rogue cornered me against a cliff face, claws reaching for my throat, I realized this was where my story ended. I'd married the enemy and died protecting the innocent. At least Father would understand the choice. The rogue's claws never reached me. Kieran appeared from nowhere, his massive form slamming into my attacker with bone-crushing force. Within seconds, all 4 rogues lay dead, and I was staring at my husband's golden eyes in his wolf form. He shifted back to human form, blood covering his clothes and concern etched across his features. "Are you hurt? Don't touch me," I snarled, backing away despite my injuries. "Don't you dare touch me." "Mira, what's wrong? We need to get back. Help the others." "Like you were helping them when you disappeared into the forest? Like you were helping when you were talking on that communicator?" My voice broke with fury and heartbreak. "I saw you, Kieran. I saw you coordinating with someone while pack members died." His face went white. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it? What orders were you following? What plans does your family have for our territories?" Before he could answer, a new voice cut through the night air. "Touching reunion, nephew." Marcus Ashford stepped from the shadows, flanked by a dozen rogues. He looked exactly like the respectable beta who'd attended our wedding negotiations, except for the cruel smile twisting his features. "Uncle Marcus," Kieran said carefully, "I was wondering when you'd show yourself." "Were you? How thoughtful." Marcus's pale eyes found mine. "And the new bride. Tell me, dear, how does it feel to learn your husband has been feeding information to the enemy for months?" The words hit like physical blows. "Months? Oh yes. Every patrol schedule, every defensive weakness, every alliance negotiation. Kieran has been quite helpful in ensuring our success." Marcus gestured to the burning ceremonial grounds behind us. "Tonight's victory is as much his as mine." I looked at Kieran, desperate to see denial in his eyes, some sign that his uncle was lying. Instead, I saw guilt and resignation. "Is it true?" I whispered. Yes, he said quietly, but not for the reasons you think. I don't care about your reasons. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I could barely breathe. How many? How many people died because of your information? All of them, Marcus answered when Kieran remained silent. Every pack we've destroyed, every alliance we've prevented. My nephew has been instrumental in our campaign. The world tilted sideways. I'd married not just an enemy, but the architect of genocide. The man who'd claimed to want to honor Marcus's memory had been orchestrating the systematic destruction of everything my brother had died trying to protect. Why? The question tore from my throat like a physical wound. Kieran met my eyes, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine regret. Because, he said quietly, some cages can only be escaped by burning everything down. Before I could process his words, Marcus gave a signal to his rogues. They surged forward, and I realized this had all been a setup. The attack, the revelation, even Kieran's rescue, all designed to break me completely before delivering the final blow. As claws reached for my throat, my last coherent thought was wondering if father would ever learn the truth about how thoroughly his daughter had been deceived. The moon overhead seemed to dim as consciousness faded, leaving me in darkness that felt like it might never end. Chapter 6. Blood and Gold. I awoke to the acrid smell of smoke and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. My hands were bound with silver chains that burned against my wrists, and I was propped against a tree at the edge of what had been our ceremonial grounds. Bodies lay scattered across the stone circle where I'd been married hours earlier. The bride awakens, Marcus Ashford said, stepping into my field of vision. He'd changed from his formal clothes into tactical gear, looking every inch the military commander. Perfect timing. The real show is about to begin. I tried to speak, and found my throat raw from smoke inhalation. Where's my father? Safe for now, along with the other survivors we need for leverage. Marcus crouched down until we were eye level. You see, my dear, this was never about eliminating the packs entirely. It was about consolidating them under proper leadership. Your leadership. Of course. The current Alpha system is weak, fractured, inefficient. Too many small territories, too much wasted potential. His pale eyes gleamed with fanatic certainty. I'm creating something better, stronger. A unified region under centralized control. By murdering innocent people. By removing obstacles to progress. He stood and began pacing. Your marriage to Kieran was actually quite helpful. It gathered both packs in one location. Made the cleanup much more efficient. Rage burned through me. Hotter than the silver chains. And Kieran? Was he part of this from the beginning? Marcus's smile turned cruel. Why don't you ask him yourself? He gestured, and two rogues dragged Kieran into the clearing. He was in human form, blood covering his shirt, with silver shackles around his wrists and ankles that prevented shifting. When he saw me conscious, relief flooded his features. Mira, thank God you're alive. Don't, I snarled. Don't you dare act like you care. I do care, more than you know. Touching, Marcus interrupted. But we have business to conclude. Kieran, you've served your purpose admirably, but I'm afraid your usefulness has ended. Something shifted in Kieran's expression. Uncle Marcus, you promised... I promised nothing. You chose to feed us information hoping to minimize casualties, thinking you could somehow control the outcome. Marcus pulled a silver blade from his belt. Naive. The moon-chosen alpha powers you've been hiding make you too dangerous to leave alive. My world tilted. Moon-chosen alpha? Oh, she doesn't know. Marcus looked delighted. Dear nephew, you didn't tell your bride about your little divine blessing? How you've been growing stronger each month, developing abilities that could unite every pack in the region under your leadership? I stared at Kieran, pieces clicking into horrible place. That's why you agreed to the marriage. Not for alliance. For power. No, Kieran said desperately. Mira, listen to me. I've been feeding Marcus information, yes, but not to help him. I've been trying to stay ahead of his plans, to minimize the damage. By letting entire packs die? By ensuring some survived. Every piece of intelligence I gave him was designed to make him overconfident, to make him think he had more control than he did. Kieran's golden eyes burned with intensity. I've been gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for the right moment to expose him. What evidence? Marcus laughed. Boy, I've been planning this for years. There's nothing you could have discovered that I didn't want you to find. Actually, Kieran said quietly, there is. He closed his eyes, and I felt something shift in the air around us. Power, ancient and wild, began radiating from his bound form. The silver chains holding him started to glow, then crack. Impossible, Marcus breathed. Silver suppresses all supernatural abilities. Not mine, not anymore. Kieran opened his eyes, and they blazed with golden fire that seemed to come from within. Moon-chosen alphas aren't bound by normal limitations. The chains shattered explosively. Kieran surged to his feet, power rolling off him in waves that made every rogue in the clearing take an involuntary step backward. This wasn't the controlled, elegant man I'd married. This was something primal, and magnificent, and terrifying. You want to know what I discovered, Uncle? Kieran's voice carried supernatural authority that pressed against my consciousness like a physical force. I discovered that you've been taking orders from someone else. Someone who promised you power in exchange for destabilizing the region. Marcus's confident expression faltered. That's ridiculous. Is it? Then explain the vampire sense at every attack site. Explain the military-grade silver weapons that aren't available through normal channels. Explain why you've been systematically targeting packs with strategic territories rather than just powerful ones. My blood turned to ice. Vampires and werewolves had maintained an uneasy truce for decades. But if the vampire clans were backing Marcus's rebellion, the Vampire Council wants our territories, I realized. They're using you to weaken us so they can move in. Clever girl, Marcus said, his mask of civility finally slipping completely. Though it hardly matters now, you'll both be dead before dawn. He gestured to his rogues, but before they could move, Kieran exploded into action. His transformation was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Instead of the painful bone-cracking shift normal wolves experienced, his change flowed like liquid mercury. One moment he was human, the next he stood as the massive black wolf I'd seen before. But now power radiated from every line of his body. He moved through the rogues like death itself. Not the efficient, controlled fighter I'd observed earlier, but something unleashed and devastating. Claws and fangs found targets with supernatural precision. Bodies fell around him in sprays of blood, but there were too many of them, and more kept emerging from the forest. For every rogue Kieran killed, 2 more appeared. Even with his enhanced abilities, he was being overwhelmed. Marcus drew a silver blade and circled toward me while Kieran was distracted. If I can't have a unified territory, I'll settle for destroying the moon-chosen alpha's mate. His power is tied to emotional bonds. Lose you, and he loses everything. Terror spiked through me as Marcus raised the blade, but as death descended, something awakened inside me. Heat flooded my veins, and suddenly the silver chains holding me felt fragile as spider silk. I yanked my hands apart, and the shackles shattered like glass. Marcus froze, his blade halfway to my throat. What? Power erupted from my core, golden light that matched Kieran's eyes. I could feel abilities I'd never known I possessed flooding through my system. Enhanced strength, supernatural speed, and something else. A connection to every living thing in the forest. True mate, Marcus whispered, backing away in obvious terror. You're his true mate. I stood slowly, power crackling around me like visible electricity. I'm what? The moon goddess's answer to the moon-chosen alpha. His perfect complement. Marcus's voice shook. Together, your powers will be unstoppable. I looked across the clearing to where Kieran was still fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Our eyes met, and I felt something snap into place between us. Not just recognition, but completion. Like finding a piece of myself I'd never known was missing. The mate bond rushed through me like a tsunami, carrying with it everything Kieran had been trying to tell me. His months of feeding information to Marcus while secretly gathering evidence. His desperate attempts to minimize casualties while building a case against his uncle. His genuine horror at the destruction he'd been forced to enable. And underneath it all, the bone-deep love he'd been afraid to acknowledge, even to himself. "You stupid, noble, infuriating man," I said. Though I knew he couldn't hear me at this distance, I reached out with my newly awakened abilities and felt every rogue in the clearing. Their artificial loyalty to Marcus, maintained through a combination of vampire influence and supernatural compulsion. With surgical precision, I severed those connections. The effect was immediate. Rogues stopped mid-attack, confusion replacing bloodlust as they remembered who they'd been before Marcus's corruption. Several shifted to human form and fled into the forest. Others turned on their remaining packmates, old grievances surfacing as the compulsion broke. Marcus spun toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. The Vampire Council will take these territories with or without my help. At least my way. Some wolves survive. Your way. We become slaves," I said, walking toward him with steady steps. "My way? We fight." He lunged at me with the silver blade, but I caught his wrist effortlessly. My new strength made his desperate attack feel like a child's tantrum. With a gentle twist, I broke his arm and sent the weapon spinning away. "This isn't over," he gasped, clutching his ruined limb. "The vampires have resources you can't imagine, allies in places you'd never suspect. Then we'll deal with them when they come." I looked around the clearing, where the tide of battle had turned decisively. "Right now, I'm more concerned with cleaning up your mess." Kieran appeared beside me, having shifted back to human form. Blood covered him from head to toe, but his golden eyes burned with relief, and something deeper that made my heart race. "Are you hurt?" he asked, reaching toward me before stopping himself. "I mean, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but—" I silenced him by pressing my lips to his. The kiss tasted of blood and smoke and desperate hope, but underneath it all was the rightness of coming home. When we broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. "We'll talk later," I said. "Right now, we have a pack to save and vampires to prepare for." "Together?" he asked, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. I looked around at the bodies scattered across our wedding grounds, at the pack members emerging cautiously from hiding, at Marcus Ashford being restrained by his own former rogues. The road ahead would be difficult, dangerous, and probably deadly. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt equal to the challenge. "Together," I confirmed. The moon hung overhead, casting everything in silver light that seemed to bless our decision. In the distance, wolves began to howl, not in mourning, but in celebration of survival and the promise of better days ahead. We had work to do, but first, we had a mate bond to complete and a love story to begin properly. Some things, I was learning, were worth fighting for. Chapter 7. Moon's Blessing. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as we gathered the survivors in the pack house's main hall. Of the 53 Crescent Pack members, 37 had survived the attack. The Shadowmere delegation had lost 8 of their 12 wolves. Bodies were wrapped and prepared for burial, while the wounded received medical attention. Father sat with his arm in a sling, directing cleanup efforts with characteristic determination. When he saw Kieran and me enter together, his expression shifted through relief, concern, and something that might have been approval. "The rogues who can be reasoned with have been secured," he reported. "Marcus refuses to talk, but some of his former followers are being more cooperative." "What have they told you?" I asked, settling into a chair beside him. My new abilities had stabilized, but using them so extensively had left me exhausted. "The vampire involvement goes deeper than we thought. Marcus was promised leadership of the entire Northwestern Territory in exchange for destabilizing the pack system." Father's jaw tightened. "There are similar operations underway in 3 other regions." Kieran moved to study the map spread across the table. "A coordinated continental assault. They're not just after our territory. They're after the entire North American pack structure. Which means this is far from over," I said grimly. "Actually," Vincent interrupted from the doorway, "it might be closer to ending than you think." Our alpha entered carrying a leather satchel that he set carefully on the table. Kieran's intelligence gathering was more extensive than anyone realized. He's been documenting vampire involvement for 8 months, building evidence that proves treaty violations going back years. Vincent opened the satchel to reveal photographs, audio recordings, financial documents, and detailed maps. Communication intercepts, financial transfers, territorial agreements made in secret, everything needed to present a formal case to the Supernatural Council. I stared at the evidence, then at Kieran. This is what you were really doing. Not just minimizing casualties, gathering proof. I needed irrefutable evidence before making accusations this serious, he said quietly. Vampires have powerful allies on the council. Without absolute proof, they would have dismissed any charges and escalated their operations. And now? Now we have enough to demand immediate intervention. Vincent's smile was grim. The council takes treaty violations seriously, especially when they involve systematic genocide. Father leaned forward to examine the documents. How long before we can present this? The emergency session convenes tomorrow night, Vincent said. Representatives from all major supernatural factions will attend. If our evidence is accepted, the vampires responsible will face severe sanctions. And if it's not, I asked, then we prepare for war, Kieran said simply, because they won't stop with our territories. The gravity of the situation settled over us like a heavy blanket. We were no longer just fighting for survival. We were fighting to prevent a continental conflict that could destroy the supernatural world as we knew it. There's something else, Vincent continued, his tone becoming more formal. The events of last night have triggered certain prophecies. My heart skipped. What kind of prophecies? The emergence of a moon-chosen alpha and his true mate has been foretold for centuries. It's said to herald a new age for shapeshifters. Either unprecedented prosperity or complete annihilation. Vincent's ancient eyes found mine. The choice depends entirely on how you handle the power you've been given. No pressure, I muttered. Kieran moved to stand behind my chair, his hand settling on my shoulder. The contact sent warmth through me, steadying my nerves. We'll face whatever comes, together. Which brings us to the immediate question, Father said, looking between us meaningfully. Your marriage was completed under pack law, but the mate bond remains incomplete. Heat flooded my cheeks. The mate bond, the spiritual, supernatural connection that would permanently unite Kieran and me on every level. It required a claiming ritual that was far more intimate than any legal ceremony. The timing needs to be right, Vincent said diplomatically. The bond completion will amplify both your abilities significantly, but it also creates vulnerabilities. You'll be psychically linked. His pain becomes yours, and vice versa. It also, Kieran added quietly, requires absolute trust and consent from both parties. After everything that's happened, I understand if you need time. I turned to study his face, reading the genuine concern there. Despite the mate bond's pull, despite the prophecies and political necessities, he was giving me the choice. Not pressuring, not demanding, just waiting. Actually, I said, standing and taking his hand. I think I've had enough time to decide. The conversation around us faded as Kieran's golden eyes widened with surprise and hope. Are you sure? He asked. After the lies, the deception, after understanding why you did it, after seeing what you were willing to sacrifice to protect innocent people. I stepped closer, close enough to smell that wild, clean scent that made my wolf sing with recognition. After feeling what we could become together, his free hand came up to cup my cheek. Mira. The bond doesn't erase what happened, I said softly, but it does mean we face everything else as partners. Equal partners. Always, he promised. Vincent cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should give you some privacy for this discussion. Within minutes, the hall had emptied, leaving Kieran and me alone with the weight of destiny and the future of our people resting on our decision. Tell me what the claiming involves, I said, settling back into my chair. Kieran took the seat across from me, his expression serious. The ritual itself is simple. Exchange of bites, mingling of blood, mutual acceptance of the bond. But the consequences are permanent and profound. Explain. We'll be able to sense each other's emotions, share strength and abilities, communicate telepathically across distances. He paused. We'll also share each other's pain, both physical and emotional. If one of us dies, the other likely will too. And the power amplification? Unknown territory. Moon-chosen alphas are rare enough, but a bonded pair. He shook his head. The old texts speak of abilities that border on the divine. Perfect coordination, enhanced healing, the power to command loyalty from any shifter. Sounds like exactly what we need to face the vampire threat, or exactly what could corrupt us beyond recognition. His honesty was both refreshing and terrifying. Power like that changes people, Mira. Not always for the better. I considered this, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Around us, the pack house buzzed with activity, as our people prepared for an uncertain future. They were depending on us to make the right choices. "Do you trust me?" I asked finally. "With my life. Then trust me with this decision too." I stood and extended my hand. "I want to complete the bond. Not because of prophecies or political necessity, but because what I felt during that battle, that connection, that completion, it's what I've been searching for my entire life without knowing it." He took my hand, his fingers interlacing with mine. "The claiming should happen under moonlight, in a place that's sacred to both our bloodlines. I know the perfect spot." We walked through the forest to Marcus's memorial tree, where this entire journey had begun with a rogue attack that brought us together. The massive oak stood unchanged despite the violence that had swept through the area, its branches reaching toward the gradually darkening sky. "Here," I said, settling with my back against the ancient bark. "Where Marcus died, where I almost died, where you saved me. It feels right." Kieran knelt beside me, his golden eyes reflecting the first stars appearing overhead. "Are you absolutely certain? Once we do this, there's no going back." Instead of answering with words, I pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of hope and promises, and the future we were choosing together. When we broke apart, the full moon was rising overhead, casting everything in silver light. "I'm certain," I whispered. The claiming ritual was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. When Kieran's teeth found the junction of my neck and shoulder, marking me as his mate, power exploded through my system like liquid fire. I felt his essence merging with mine, his strength becoming my strength, his love wrapping around me like armor. When I returned the bite, marking him as mine, the connection snapped fully into place. Suddenly I could feel his emotions as clearly as my own. Relief, love, protective, fierce devotion, and underneath it all, a determination to be worthy of the trust I'd placed in him. The mate bond settled over us like a warm blanket, and with it came abilities I'd never imagined. I could sense every living creature within miles, feel the health of the forest itself, understand the interconnected web of life that bound everything together. "How do you feel?" Kieran asked, his voice echoing strangely in my mind. "Complete," I replied, both aloud and through our new mental link, like I've been waiting my whole life to become who I am right now. He pulled me closer, and I settled against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Tomorrow we would face the supernatural council. Next week we would begin rebuilding from the attack's devastation. Next month we might be at war with creatures who considered us inferior species. But tonight, under the blessing of the full moon and surrounded by the peace of the ancient forest, we were exactly where we belonged. "I love you," Kieran said quietly, the words carrying weight that transcended mere emotion. "I love you too," I replied, meaning it with every fiber of my being. The mate bond hummed between us, and in that connection, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Absolute certainty about the future. Whatever challenges awaited, whatever powers we'd been given, whatever destiny the prophecies demanded, we would face it together. And that, I realized, was exactly how it should be. The moon goddess herself seemed to approve, her light growing brighter overhead, as if blessing our union and the hope it represented for all our people. Some stories ended with happily ever after. Ours, I suspected, was just beginning. Chapter 8. Dawn of Forever. 6 months after the claiming ritual, I stood on the balcony of our new pack house, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. The building itself was a marvel of cooperation, designed jointly by Crescent and Shadowmere architects, constructed by volunteers from both packs, and blessed by the moon goddess herself on the night we moved in. Below me, the unified Moonrise pack went about their morning routines. Children who had been strangers 6 months ago now played together in mixed groups, their laughter echoing through the courtyard. Former enemies had become neighbors, brothers in arms, family. "You're up early," Kieran said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Even after months of the mate bond, his touch still sent warmth through my entire system. "The twins are active this morning," I said, placing my hands over my rounded belly. "I think they're going to be early risers like their father." His hands covered mine, and through our bond, I felt his wonder and protective love. The healers had confirmed it last week. We were carrying twins, a boy and a girl who would be born with the rare dual nature of alpha and healer. The old prophecies spoke of such children as bridges between the supernatural and human worlds. "Any word from the council?" I asked, leaning back against his chest. "Marcus was sentenced to permanent exile this morning. The vampire clans responsible for backing his rebellion have been sanctioned, and their territories placed under council oversight." His voice carried satisfaction. "It's over, Mira. The threat is finally ended." The months following our mating had been a whirlwind of change. The evidence Kieran had gathered proved devastating to the vampire conspiracy. 3 major vampire houses had fallen, their leaders imprisoned or exiled. The systematic attacks on pack territories had ceased entirely. More importantly, our successful alliance had inspired others. 12 pack mergers had taken place across the continent, creating stronger, more unified territories. The age of small, vulnerable packs living in constant fear was ending. "Father wants to know if you've made a decision about the Interpack Council position," Kieran said. I groaned softly. The newly formed council had offered me a leadership role, coordinating defense strategies for the entire Northeastern Alliance. It was an honor, but it would mean extensive travel and time away from our pack. "What do you think?" "I think," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple, "that you were born to lead. The question is whether you want to lead our pack or help guide all of them." Through our mental link, I felt his complete support for whatever choice I made. That was perhaps what I loved most about our bond. He enhanced my strengths without trying to diminish them. "The ceremony starts in an hour," I said, changing the subject. "Are you ready?" Today marked the official establishment of the unified Moonrise Pack, with both former alphas stepping down to install Kieran and me as joint leaders. It was unprecedented. Shared alpha leadership between mates. But then again, most of what we'd accomplished had been unprecedented. The ceremony took place in the same stone circle where we'd been married, though now it was surrounded by a thriving settlement rather than forest. Representatives from 43 allied packs had come to witness the historic transition. Vincent Crane, looking older but more at peace than I'd ever seen him, performed the ritual. By the ancient laws of succession and the blessing of the moon goddess, I transfer leadership of the Crescent bloodline to Mira Castellan Ashford, true Luna, of the unified Moonrise Pack. The ceremonial blade cut across my palm, my blood mixing with the sacred earth. Power flowed through me, not just my own abilities, but the collective strength and trust of every pack member who accepted my leadership. Alpha Reginald performed the same ritual for Kieran, though his eyes held a pride that went beyond political necessity. In the months since Marcus's betrayal was revealed, he'd worked tirelessly to repair his family's reputation and support our leadership. By the ancient laws and divine blessing, we accept joint leadership of the unified Moonrise Pack, Kieran and I said in unison, our voices carrying supernatural authority that resonated through every wolf present. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. I could feel every member of our combined pack, their hopes, fears, loyalty, and trust. Nearly 100 souls now looked to us for guidance and protection. The responsibility was staggering, but through the mate bond, Kieran's strength steadied me. Together, we were more than the sum of our parts. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, with wolves from dozens of packs sharing stories, forming new friendships, and planning future cooperation. Children played elaborate games that mixed traditions from different bloodlines. Elders shared wisdom that crossed territorial boundaries. As I watched our people, formerly enemies, now family, dance together under the full moon, I felt a deep sense of completion. This was what Marcus had died trying to protect. This was what Kieran had sacrificed so much to preserve. This was what our children would inherit. Any regrets? Kieran asked as we finally retreated to our private quarters. I considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, I'd been a grieving daughter consumed with hatred for the man who was now my husband and co-leader. The journey from enemy to mate had been neither easy nor predictable. About marrying you? About trusting you? About building this life together? I settled into his arms, our twins kicking contentedly between us. Not a single one. Even though I lied to you initially, even though you were protecting people in the only way you knew how, I met his golden eyes. We both made choices we're not proud of. The difference is what we built from those choices. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, and through our bond, I felt his deep contentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, council meetings, territorial disputes, the constant work of leadership. But tonight, we were exactly where we belonged. I love you, Mrs. Ashford, he murmured against my hair. I love you too, Mr. Ashford, I replied, using our shared name that symbolized the unity we'd created. As sleep claimed us, I felt the gentle pulse of our mate bond, the steady strength of our pack connections, and the flutter of our unborn children. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities and challenges, and the certain knowledge that whatever came, we would face it together. The moon goddess had chosen well, I thought drowsily. Some bonds were worth every trial required to forge them. But Mira and Kieran's story is just the beginning. Throughout our supernatural world, countless other souls are searching for their destined mates, fighting battles no one understands, struggling to find their place in the darkness. Their tales of love, transformation, and supernatural bonds are waiting to be discovered. Each story holds the power to heal hearts and ignite hope in those who need it most. If this journey touched your soul, our collection of passionate paranormal romances awaits you. Stories of forbidden love, second chances, and bonds that defy all odds. Please subscribe and like this video. It'll help our channel reach even greater heights. Thank you for sharing this adventure with us tonight. Until our paths cross again in the next tale,